In 1518, the city of Strasbourg tried to cure dancing with more dancing. It made things worse. Everything you are about to hear comes from records that survive. The minutes of the Strasbourg City Council, kept in the summer of 1518. A chronicle compiled by a Strasbourg notary named Daniel Specklin. Later in the same century, a retrospective account from the physician Paracelsus, writing in the 1530s, and a peer-reviewed reconstruction by the historian John Waller, published in 2009. Where those records disagree, this video will say so. Where they agree, this is what they say. In the summer of 1518, Strasbourg was a free imperial city of roughly 20,000 people, sitting on the Rhine inside the Holy Roman Empire. The previous years had been hard. Harvests had failed. Bread had been rationed. A wave of sweating sickness had moved through the region the year before. Religious anxiety was constant. The Reformation was less than a year from breaking. People were exhausted, hungry, and afraid. None of this is unusual for the period. It is the background, not the cause. It is simply the ground the outbreak began on. In July of that year, in a narrow street in Strasbourg, a woman stepped into the open and began to dance. The chronicle gives her a name: Frau Troffea. She danced alone, without music, without explanation, into the evening, and into the next day. She did not stop. Within days, others joined. By the end of the first week, the chronicle records dozens. The records describe people dancing in the streets, in the markets, in the squares. They describe the dancing as involuntary. People who tried to stop could not. The records do not describe joy. They describe exhaustion. People collapsing. People bleeding from the feet. By the second week, the city had a problem it did not understand. The dancing had spread. The numbers in the records grow. Not dozens, but, in the worst weeks, several hundred. The exact peak is not preserved. Specific death tolls cited in popular retellings, 15 a day, 400 dead, do not appear in the surviving records in that form. What the records do say, plainly, is that people died from exhaustion, from injury, from heart failure. The dancing went on for roughly a month. Then the city government did something that made it worse. The Strasbourg City Council met. The physicians of the city were consulted. Their theory, recorded in the council minutes, was a humoral one. The affliction was caused by overheated blood, and the only cure was to let the blood burn itself out through exertion. In other words, the dancers had to keep dancing until the disease ran its course. So the council acted on that advice. They hired musicians. They cleared 2 guild halls. They built a wooden stage in the open. They paid pipers and drummers to play. The aim was not entertainment. The aim was treatment. The city government's official intervention against an outbreak of involuntary dancing was to provide better conditions for it. It did not work. With music and with a stage, the dancing did not burn itself out. It intensified. More people joined. More people collapsed. More people died. After several weeks of this, the city reversed course. The musicians were dismissed. The stage came down. The afflicted were taken from the streets to a shrine in the mountains dedicated to Saint Vitus. On the alternative theory, favored by the city's bishop, that the affliction was a curse from that saint, and could only be lifted by him. Within weeks of the policy reversal, the outbreak ended. There are 2 named modern explanations for what happened. They cannot both be right. The most widely cited modern reading is the historian John Waller's, in a 2009 paper in The Lancet, and in a book published the same year. Waller argues that the Strasbourg outbreak was an episode of mass psychogenic illness, a real, involuntary physical affliction with a social and psychological trigger, made possible by the conditions of 1518 Strasbourg and the period's pre-existing belief in the curse of St. Vitus. Waller's reconstruction works directly from the city council records. The named counterposition belongs to the historian Mary Matossian. In a 1989 monograph published by Yale University Press, Matossian argues that the dancing could be explained by ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on damp rye and that can produce neurological symptoms. Most working historians since have not accepted this for 1518 specifically. Ergot poisoning typically produces gangrene or convulsions, not weeks of sustained ambulatory dancing. But it is a named position in the literature, and it is the one Waller is most often contrasted with. This video does not pick a winner. The disagreement is real, and it is 100 years old. What is known? The outbreak happened. People died. The city's first official response made the situation worse. Its second response, a religious one, coincided with the outbreak ending, although coincidence and cause are not the same. What is not known? Why it began with one woman in July 1518, and not in some other city, in some other summer, with some other person. What is not known? Whether the affliction was contagious in any biological sense, or only in a social one. What is not known? Whether the deaths would have stopped sooner without the stage and the musicians. The records preserve the decisions. They do not preserve the counterfactual. In 2011, in the village of Leroy, in upstate New York, approximately 18 students at the local junior-senior high school developed sudden, involuntary, Tourette-like tics. The New York State Department of Health investigated, working with the treating neurologists. They ruled out environmental toxins. They ruled out infections. They ruled out pharmaceutical causes. The diagnosis they reached, publicly, was conversion disorder, what the older literature calls mass psychogenic illness. The same diagnostic category the historian John Waller proposes for the Strasbourg dancers in 1518. This is not proof of Waller's reading of 1518. It is something quieter. It is the same name, given by a public health authority in a documented modern case, to a real cluster of involuntary symptoms that no other cause could explain. In 1518, the city of Strasbourg tried to cure dancing with more dancing. We are still arguing about why it did not work.